So building on the research that I just shared, our next panel will take us from theory to practice, exploring how VDC is actively driving innovation on real-world projects. Our speakers will share how digital tools like BIM, reality capture, and digital twins are reshaping collaboration, streamlining workflows, and pushing the industry towards smarter, more connected construction. So I'd like to invite up to the stage Stuart Trahota, Shane Saltzgiver, and Neil Juan. We can start off with a quick round of introductions before we dive into some of the questions. And we'll start here with Neil.
Neil Johan. I work for Ellis-Don Corporation. I'm their Director of VDC Services. I've started with the company back in 2015, and my main domain has been reality capture ever since. So, thanks for having me.
Hey everybody, I'm Stuart Trahota. I work for DPR Construction. I lead our Florida virtual building team. Been there for about 7 years. Virtual building for us is VDC, BIM modeling, as well as reality capture and survey.
Hello, I'm Shane Saltzgiver, founder and CEO of VEC. And VEC, we exist to really help improve project performance and attack waste and inefficiencies. So we work across various project stakeholders from the programming stage throughout construction. We often get kind of bundled under the umbrella of BIM providers or VDC providers, but really it's just looking at any way that we can attack inefficiency, labor shortages, using prefabrication, modularization, really just looking at every component of the project lifecycle to figure out how we can squeeze more out of it and build more faster. I want to share one thing. Last time I was in this building was 9 years ago, and it's kind of a testament to how VDC has transformed in the last decade. I recently quit working for a contractor and pursued my company full time. I was an employee of one. Today we're 250 employees across 6 global offices. So just a testament of even though our industry is maybe slower to adopt, we are still advancing at an incredibly rapid rate. Thanks for letting me be here.
Awesome. And to start us off here, I kind of want to just set the scene and ask each of you how you would define the current state of VDC within your organization from the GC side, and then in the industry more broadly for Shane's perspective.
Yeah, I can start that one off. I mean, at Ellis-Don, VDC had been around since 2006, 2007. We first implemented just BIM in general at the Art Gallery of Ontario, in Toronto. And I mean, from there till now, and even from Shane's comment about even 10 years ago, I would say that within Ellis-Don, we're at an inflection point, I would say, with VDC. Rather than it being something that's imposed, it's something that is being depended on, right? And instead of being reactionary, it's getting to a point of inflection where it's predictive. And I would say that's the general trend of where VDC is going, especially within Ellis-Don. I mean, for my team, I'm the services division of our VDC, wherein our operations have our coordinators on site, deals with the core construction base operations of Ellis-Don. For me, I act as a VEC within Ellis-Don, where I'm able to implement these technologies, specialized technologies, to essentially white glove and help to service my enterprise. Right? And so I'm able to service not just our core construction operations, which is the lion's share of our market, but other divisions of Ellis-Don, our facility services division. We're doing work for our community builders or developers, marketing, right? So I would say that's the trend.
All right, DPR, I guess we've integrated VDC pretty heavily. We have a team of a few hundred VDC and field technology professionals, surveyors, BIM modelers, and we have some guidelines in place at DPR where if the project's over $5 million, we're going to implement BIM. If our self-performed scope for drywall or concrete is over $1 million, we're going to implement modeling for that piece. But we've really tried to connect the field and the office, the digital and the real world through VDC and reality capture. I would say we still have some opportunities to continue to implement, but if we can think of the model as the on a linear timeline and taking it from design through construction, coordination, fabricating our shop drawings, and then updating our as-builts with reality capture tools all the way to facility management. That's the dream. Some of us are doing it. We're trying hard, but I think we're on our way. But I think that's where we're at right now.
Yeah, I'm looking kind of at the industry overall. 10 years ago, say just the discussion of BIM would you get tons of different responses. You had a superintendent or a project executive that had one project in BIM and it went terrible. And they said, "I'm done with BIM. I'm done with this technology stuff." And now looking back, since that time, 10 years, those discussions don't happen as often. So from like a macro level, the industry implementing things, any kind of technology is far more acceptable and expected. And it's really kind of opened the door for us to explore beyond just kind of the basic beginning of just modeling projects. But we still face many issues. I mean, we talk about labor shortages in the field in project management, but we have our own labor shortages as well. It's much more than just technology to do what we do. It's learning how to apply that technology in a way that moves the needle on the project. And that takes constructability knowledge, construction knowledge, field knowledge, engineering knowledge. And so as I'm looking at it, seeing all these companies growing and the demand for deploying this software in hard run projects, we're seeing companies across all stakeholders really struggle in many areas to find the right talent and get them up to speed while we're all competing for labor, the same kind of labor pool across the industry. And I think that despite how maybe more open people are today to deploy it and welcoming of it, having good experiences, hopefully most of the time, that there's still huge disconnects. It's still largely siloed across disciplines. Even within this, the objective here was to make things more collaborative, but we're still very much siloed. We're missing many opportunities still to deploy this technology earlier in the process during design, making sure that we're aligned from a programmatic level, instead of starting off the job with misaligned expectations. So yeah, I think it's been amazing to see 10 years of progress, but also we've kind of built ourselves into our own chaotic, siloed world that has taken time for us to work through.
Awesome, thank you all. This next question is for Stuart specifically. At DPR, in your role, you've led efforts to integrate AI-driven utility mapping, drone data, and scanning into your VDC workflows. How have these evolved the role of VDC, not just in risk mitigation, but in connecting the field and office teams and shaping how projects are planned and executed?
Yeah, thanks. So I think it's the emphasis now is the model has to be real, right? It's no longer, we're just coordinating to coordinate, and it's this pretty model that lives in space. It's this is the model that we're building off of. It's at this exact point in the world. Everything's coordinated in terms of grids and making sure that we're matching our models to the field. And then it's, how are we QCing our work? How are we, we do a lot of self-perform work, so it's integrated into our workflow now. It's we have teams that do the concrete modeling, they do the drywall modeling, and then they're actually going out and installing it in the field. Then we're checking our work with our scans, our total stations, our drones. And, it's just kind of bringing it all together. But if that model isn't real, what are we comparing it to? So it's kind of forced us to up our game in our VDC. And that's where I cut my teeth in the field with reality capture, and then I came into a role where I was on the VDC side, and it was well, how real is this, guys? Is the superintendent in the meeting? Like, is he helping coordination? What about the trades? Who's involved? You get a lot of these times where you're in a meeting and, the detailer and the trade partner, they're not communicating, right? So I think it's really just, kind of bringing it all together and making BDC more real. And when we can do that, we have success.
Great. And as we've discussed in many of our panels today is the role of data in implementing new technologies. So I wanted to ask the full group, with reality capture technologies like laser scanning and drones, which are generating vast amounts of spatial data, how are you integrating that data back into your models in real time? And are you starting to see a more living model emerge during construction?
Yeah, no, that's a great question. I think, just as Stuart had said, making VDC real, right? So rather than having a virtual environment that lives in its own space, really the true beauty and value that's derived is through integrations, right? So as you mentioned, flying drones over a site, scanning for, equipment, installation verification, tolerances, and the like. Really, all these data sets would need to be communicating with one another, even if I have to, hand fist and manually make sure that this workflow exists. But at the same time, on the other side is that buy-in from our operations, from our field staff. As Shane mentioned, some folks 10 years ago would have said, this is an extra, and I don't want this on my project. And it's funny that at Elliston, those same people are champions for us. They've seen the value that's being derived from that, and from them championing us as facilitators, it just gets the ball rolling, right? And so, I was just talking to Chakota out there from Struts Hub. They're one of our strategic partners. He showed me something cool where, the drone deploy map that we may fly on a weekly basis is now integrated into that logistics plan for Struts Hub, right? And other such integrations, timescapes with drone deploy. And so we see all those kind of connections wherein it's not so much a BIM model or even a model per se, it's just a representation of reality. It is an interface for you to use, essentially, for your work.
I think real time, are we updating in real time? Like kind of, sort of, I would say. Using tools like ACC or Trimble Connect, like there is a component there. You can go in and set different things. Some cool things that we're looking at right now, testing, working through. In Trimble Connect specifically is a simple workflow with a DA2 GPS unit. You can basically hook it up to a LiDAR iPhone or iPad, and you can literally go out there in the field, scan, and then that's pretty much instantaneously uploaded to the cloud. So we have instances where we've got teams in a call, someone's out in the field scanning. Real time, you've got accurate LiDAR data. It may not look too super pretty, but democratizing not only the consumption but the capture of that information is something that's really interesting. And then also with Trimble Connect, you could have a guy out in the field with a total station checking anchor bolts and set a tolerance on those anchor bolts, send that back to Trimble Connect. And in real time in the office, you could be seeing like, hey, yellow, red, green, markers on top of that anchor bolt to see if, hey, how's this going out there? My guy's been out there for 2-3 hours. Oh, we've got a troublesome spot we might need to go look at. So it's getting there with the real-time connectivity for sure.
Yeah, I'll have maybe just a little different take on it. First really starting from the objective and understanding like what is really needed in real time. That just if you're collecting point cloud data, daily or weekly on the site, you're getting terabytes of data, and what's the objective with collecting that? And I'll give you an example because it kind of helps to streamline this real time. That we started doing pre-pour scanning 7 or 8 years ago, and the objective was not to laser scan pre-pour. The objective was to figure out is anything built out of tolerance and be able to give that information to the field team to correct it before concrete goes in the next day. So the point cloud was just a means to an end. Now we have the data, it's in an archive, it can always be used, but But the objective there was how do we get information back to the superintendent as simple as possible so they can make a corrective plan within minutes. And so going through the data collection, the analysis, ultimately to get to a single PDF document that can be sent via email or whatever it means. And within 5 minutes, that superintendent knows what action needs to be taken. So I think that's what we're always looking for. Is it's great to collect data, it's great to have it, but working backwards from that objective to figure out how to get that data into a usable format. It's great to go in and laser scan existing facilities, and you should before you're renovating them. But if you're just going to hand this massive point cloud over to the design team, it's very difficult for them to utilize that. So you got to take that, break it down, and get it into a usable format. So I think that's it's becoming increasingly more important as we're collecting more and more data across many different hardware and software options. So just a little different spin on what these guys cover.
Yeah, no, I totally agree with that. I mean, the focus should be on the pain point itself, right? The actual problem that requires a solution. And really these things are just tools in us getting to that solution and then making that deliverable actionable. Like the amount of times I've heard, this heat map, which I hate using that term because it's not an actual heat map, but showing the gradients of flatness on a plane is cool, right? But is it usable? Am I able to give this as a drawing to our super on site and have that person have it actionable to their subs, right? Just immediately. So there's a lot of back end work that needs to, or front end, let's say.
And Shane, I'm heading back to you for this one. You've worked across various stakeholders in the industry, GCs, trades, designers, and owners. Where are you seeing the biggest disconnects in BDC implementation today, and how are you helping to bridge those gaps in your role?
Yeah, I think the opportunity for disconnects is really at the start and end of every major phase. So I think the majority of disconnects often start from the programming stage. As an owner and a web developer, often during the design process, defaulting to what the architect recommends. Hey, this is what we should be doing for BIM, and this is what I'll have the MEP disciplines doing for BIM. And owner says, great, I want BIM, let's go. And we find time and time again that what's being baked at that time is not really being looked through in meticulous detail. And that really sets the stage. So I think a big part of addressing that disconnect specifically is really from an education standpoint. It's difficult. We can get very technical and nerd out very fast. And I've realized there's a lot of education and knowledge that needs to be shared with those key decision makers early on, and it has to start from the owner in that owner rep position. It has to have the best possible chance for a positive outcome. And I found too that it's often best to be able to get all the primary stakeholders in that room initially. We had a great meeting a few months ago. We had the owner rep, the architects, all the MEP engineers, and the structural engineer before the general contractor was onboarded. And it's the same discussion that I had just direct to owners many times before, where it's very difficult and where we go next. With the entire group in that room, we could put everything on the table. The architect could voice their concerns or voice their suggestions. You start seeing light bulbs going off across the team. And so it really enabled us to move quickly into a collaborative environment instead of just talking about ideas and things that should be done. So yeah, I think that's kind of the origin of the disconnects. And then every time there's that stage, that phase handover, design to construction, you've got a whole new level of disconnects that happen and misunderstandings that ultimately come back to us in budget overruns and schedule impacts.
Great. And Neil, wanted to dive in on a specific area with you as well. In your role at Elliston, you've worked with 3D LiDAR scanning on different projects. How are you using that reality captured data to improve not just verification, but also proactive decision making during construction? And is that changing how you think about QA/QC or model-based coordination?
Yeah, I mean, as I mentioned before, I see back 10 years ago, reality capture as a term was mainly used for LiDAR capture, right? Whether it be terrestrial, mobile, what have you. But what I see and what I have seen is that really we see a convergence of these technologies as being capture. So whether it be 360 imagery, capture on a site, doing a site walk on a weekly basis, to then plug into another platform that will produce predictive analytics from having it as a data set compared to the schedule, compared to the model. As well, leading the drone program, I've seen really a shift in that perspective for Elliston as well. And it does change things. I mean, we've done projects, back 5 years ago, large pharmaceutical plants, battery plants that need the tightest tolerance in their systems that need to be constructed. And so on a weekly basis, we, scan the entirety of the facility or problem areas, make sure that data is usable in a platform that's central, and then go from there, right? And so that term QA/QC, it's again, I really loved what Stuart said, was that it's making BDC real, right? It's making it tangible and conceptually more just easier for a layperson, let's say, or a person who's not in that domain or technologically inclined to understand the value straight away, right? So.
Great. And then just a few more questions from me before I open it up to the audience. Given that you all work within the VDC world, what have you found to be most effective in getting trade partners, field teams, and designers fully engaged with VDC workflows from day one?
I'll kick it off. I think it starts kind of what Shane was saying, like kickoff meetings. It can start even sooner than that, like talking with design teams, aligning around execution plans. That's a thing we like to do in the beginning. Is just, hey, apples to apples. What are we looking at here? I think when you get further along with trade partners and getting trades on board, talking with your pre-con teams, making sure everybody's understanding what sort of LOD we're looking for in terms of modeling, as-builting, all those things. How are we tracking it? When are you delivering your as-builts? It's just you gotta get going so early, and then progressive check-ins, like whenever you deliver a reality capture product, spending that extra couple minutes with whoever you're delivering it to, whether it's a superintendent or a trade partner, making sure they understand it. Sometimes people get embarrassed, I don't know how to do this, but hey, we're all people, right? So when we can kind of help people along, that seems to go a long way.
Yeah, it's kind of building on the last statement I made, but it's being able to get all the stakeholders together in an unbiased discussion, and meaning saying, hey, if we had an objective to shift, say, 50 to 70% of BIM from pre-con to design, well, what would it take? And not about putting roles yet assigned, but what would it take? And being able to look at something as simple as a concept as coordination, BIM coordination. And during the design stage, that's often defaulted to the architects. Well, maybe in some cases the architect is best to do it, maybe they love to do it, maybe they're great at it, but maybe they want to design and create and focus on the architectural elements of the project. So being able to say, all right guys, so someone needs to run coordination. Who's best to run coordination? Is it the architects on this job, or is it not, or is it somebody else? And say, okay, that's plugged. And then looking down each layer across the MEP lifecycle during that design, because where we often hit roadblocks when we're trying to innovate or do something different or change the process that we've used to date, it's usually, there's this fear response of like, oh my goodness, I'm not, we don't know how to do that. That's the contractor's job, that's not our job. And maybe it has been, but to have an open dialogue about that early on and really get alignment, we have to kind of break down these silos of expectations, look at the problem that we're trying to solve, and then figure out who's best to go about delivering that component of the project. And I think that's, from my experience, has really led to more fruitful discussions where we can talk openly and transparently about what our strengths and weaknesses are and where we all fit into that project life cycle to increase our odds of a successful outcome.
Yeah, no, I'll reflect on what Shane mentioned there, is that it's really essentially putting egos aside, right? what is the actual ask here? What is the why? Why are we in this room together? Really breaking down those walls for the silos is essential, right? Decentralizing decision-making to a degree of having a democracy, really, at the end of the day. We're all trying to make sure this project gets built. We're all trying to make sure we're doing it efficiently, cost-effectively. We all have our strengths and weaknesses and our roles, and we just have to put that all on the table, right? Early adoption, early engagement really is the key as well, as early as you can get it, right? So as you mentioned, pre-con, we do a lot of jobs for pre-con of just, essentially, especially for remodels, making sure that the entirety of that space is captured and modeled, and go from there, right? Yeah, essentially that's the key. I mean, it's a long way to go, but dare to dream, right?
Yeah, if I could add one more thing too. It's this amazing liberating experience though to witness, and this same meeting I was just referencing is recently on my mind. As we're talking about what needs to get done, and this topic of coordination comes up, and we're talking about we typically do this for general contractors in the construction stage. We love doing it. It's what we are passionate about. And the architect stands up, the woman that was leading one of the top architecture firms in the U.S., and she goes, "Wait a minute, she goes, are you telling me that you can run coordination?" I say, "Yes, ma'am, we'd love to do it. We'd be happy to." She goes, "Thank God, we hate running coordination." And without those discussions, being able to be vulnerable and say something like that, no one would ever talk about it. The architect would be assigned to do it, and then likely 6 months later, someone pointing the finger back saying, "Why the hell didn't you run coordination very well? What's going on?" And meanwhile, they just weren't the best fit on this project to do it, and somebody else was. So it's amazing though when when you can get to that place of being open, truly open, just focusing on what needs to get done, and then figure out who's going to do it after you figure that out.
I know you each just discussed some of those initial adoption hurdles and implementation challenges, how you can get all of the stakeholders aligned in order to have successful VDC implementation. So jumping forward, as VDC continues to evolve, what are some of the emerging technologies that you believe will most transform, say, the next generation of construction workflows? Is there anything on the horizon or that you've piloted that you are most excited about for the future?
I'll kick this one off. I mean, I would say, just as I mentioned before about the convergence of technologies and capture methods, I would say, what's that term, that phrase? It's the whole is greater than the sum of its parts, right? So really the value is derived from all of these communications and integrations between various forms of capture, not only that, but various platforms. And then really what excites me is that seeing VDC, or even just this construction technology as a whole, it's shifting construction as an industry of reaction, or being reactionary, to being predictive, right? So as I capture space on a weekly basis and I have my model being compared to that data set, I can then have decisions being made from actual hard data rather than gut feelings, right? And so that's what we try and do, is implement and empower our field staff to say, you don't have to react to things. As you document, you are predicting. You're being given this crystal ball, essentially, and you can make better informed decisions. I think that's the coolest thing ever. So.
Yeah, I mean, I'm excited about continuing to do more with mobile mapping and all these new whiz-bang exciting things that are coming around. But I think we got to take a step back a little bit here, and you look at like surveying as a whole in the surveying industry, and it's a dying profession. And someone said it in the panel earlier, being able to put things in manual mode, and that really stuck with me. Like, we gotta get back to the basics of teaching fundamentals about construction and people being on site and learning, skills, and getting our trade people to go back into the trades. I'm excited about what we've got going on, but that gap between, production and technology, like it's widening right now. Shane and I were talking about it earlier. So I think, the tools are here, they're gonna keep getting better, but it's more about connecting our teams and improving those processes and narrowing that gap.
Yeah, I think I'm most excited about probably the more boring things when it comes to technology because there's so much focus, and there were some presentations on it today. There's so much tech that's hitting the market. Many speakers today talked about fragmentation, the rate of adoption, how difficult it is to actually take those tools and deploy them internally and then deploy them across the project and various stakeholders. And so really looking at problems that are seemingly boring to solve, but they're very important. In the keynote today, there was a slide up about, it was 50% of superintendents, PMs, and maybe a couple others, spend their time just looking for data, looking for documents, verifying if it's correct. That's massive, right? It's kind of a boring thing to think about, a boring thing to solve, but it's massive, 50% of that class of workers on the job site. And so when it comes to what I'm most interested about right now with AI is really looking at the deployment of that, integrating that into each of our companies. Because let's be honest, as an industry, we do not share data with each other. We don't do it, it's locked up in a very tight sealed box in every one of our silos. It's very difficult for that information to ever get shared out. So we have to look internally and say, okay, well, what am I going to be able to do to take my 50% inefficiency and reduce it on my data sets? And maybe we can collectively attack 10% of that across the whole, but there's not a lot of information that we're often willing to share in our industry. So yeah, the kind of boring AI side of things, companies moving into that integrator role, hacking our own data sets, correlating data internally, I think we'll see that number start to tick down in terms of lost time on the job site. And a similar related one is site logistics. And we talked about just the amount of time spent looking for data. I was out on one of our massive data center sites. I guess every data center site is now like $10 billion, so they're all big. But I was walking the job and talking with our client about site logistics. And you have a few thousand workers on that job site, getting an understanding of how they're communicating on a daily basis, what has changed in terms of site logistics. You've got rock being blasted over here, critical picks here. You've got egress paths changing every day. The porta potty moved to there. The fire hydrant was active today, and tomorrow it's going to be deactivated. And all of this, and how are you communicating that with a few thousand workers every single day, just so they have the opportunity to get safely from the gate of the job site to their work area, to their new material laydown area on a different route they took the day before, and so on. And that waste can be compounded easily in 20-25% plus of just purely lost labor. We saw some other slides on that too, the patterns of people moving. So on these mega sites, it's massive. The amount of time when we're talking about labor shortages, you're hemorrhaging labor efficiency in things that are seemingly boring, such as site logistics, but they're massive problems and very exciting to solve. So yeah, I could talk about all the kind of shiny tech in that, but I think we've got enough on our plates today in terms of the tech stack that I'm not excited when there's a new vertical and we're solving a problem that hasn't been solved. That's great. I don't get excited about horizontal improvements, taking a tool that's 10%, got 10% more bells and whistles than the last one, because that rate of adoption curve could take an individual multiple years and a company 5+ years, and to actually ripple that in any significant way across the industry takes decades, like we've seen many, many times before. So.
Great. We're coming up against time for this session, but we have a few minutes left over for audience Q&A. If anyone has any questions, please raise your hand and we will bring the microphone to you.
Anthony Ovak, Woolwich. I thought, Stuart, you had a great point hitting upon needing to teach how the fundamentals being brought back. Because I see as AI coming forward, that AI can easily go ahead and do your coordination for you. However, AI cannot detect whether or not it's constructible actually. So how do you see the needs of teaching that constructability and other fundamentals going forward as technology advances?
Well, we're kind of doing like a back to basics, I guess, roadmap with some of our new employees. So we've started like a tiger team to kind of take, like I used to work for Henson Phelps, and so they have a pretty awesome training program to kind of get you started. So you do rotations for the first 18 to 24 months of your stint. So I think doing things like that, and then in coordination, for example, like having the superintendent, be the kind of the enforcer to sit there with the VDC engineer and help them kind of through that. So I think, like it's pairing people, together, as well as, defining that roadmap for someone that's coming up. But yeah, I agree that the AI stuff, like I love it. I use ChatGPT all the time, but it is kind of scary, some of the studies that have come out about brain cognition and I don't know if it's true or not. I'm just reading on LinkedIn, but the people are using less of their brain because they're using ChatGPT to solve everything. So
Yeah,
it's crazy.
Yeah, I actually saw a post that said, well, within our lifetimes, we'll see the new generations basically not having to write anything ever again. The art of writing an email or writing an essay will be lost. It's kind of terrifying to think about.
Well, I had one thing though, which is cool, because we were talking about this earlier, that constructability knowledge, the ability to deploy the technology effectively is more important often than just the technical knowledge of how to use the tool. So how do you teach that? How do you, when you're trying to hire and grow and scale across all of our companies in the industry, how do you teach that? Well, one thing that's been amazing to see is, when I was learning construction firsthand, you had to be on many jobs with many superintendents and many foremen, and nothing will take away from that experience. But now in that virtual environment, you can build an entire data center project in 9 months. And through that, you're having to look at every single nut and bolt of constructability. Now you need somebody there to sit there and tell you why that it can't be built like that, even if it's clash-free. So you still need to have that knowledge base, but you can crash course a project that's going to take 3 years to build in, say, 6 to 9 months in a virtual environment, and then go to the next one, and go to the next one, and go to the next one. So in a typical kind of 3-year project experience window, you can get exposure to 6 different projects of different types, and with different input and guidance from superintendents to PMs, across that project. So it gives me hope on how do we bridge this knowledge gap, as obviously a large portion of our workforce with that knowledge is leaving.
We have time for about one more question, if anyone has one.
Hi, I'm Juanita Garcia with Pepper Construction. I was curious to see how much you're seeing the adoption of digital twin technology beyond construction into facilities management, and also how much you think that'll have an influence too on industry standards for modeling.
Yeah, that's a great question. I think, as Elliston has a facility services division, relatively young, right? Within the last, I would say, 10 years. Going back to what we discussed before of early engagement, not even just adoption, right? Of just having that conversation as early as you can to then have exponentially an easier time having an as-built, having something in terms of a digital twin, defining what that digital twin actually is, right? And that will, I would say, affect standards going forward. There's no doubt, and so there's a lot of interest in twinning a physical asset, right? But what does that mean? And so we just constantly have to have that discussion, right?
Yeah, I think we got to keep defining that. I mean, we have a company called BuiltWorlds that does that, but it's underutilized at our company. I think there's a misconception, or the owner might be like, oh, I need a digital twin. And it's like you got to get those facility people in the room and talk through like, what does that mean? What data are you putting in here? How are you connecting it to the IoT? Like, what are we doing? And so often, the BIM model ends in coordination, right? And so it's like we got to change that focus of our teams of, hey, we got to keep this thing going. It's alive. It's going to keep going. Because at the end, I've had it happen a couple of times. You get to the end of the job, and all of a sudden the owner's like, well, where's the LOD 500 model we promised you? And it's like, you've been through a couple of different coordinators. Somebody's already moved on, and you're like going through the contract, and you're like, oh my gosh, like somebody's going to have to go do this now. And then they're going through Revit and adding all the, manuals and all the crap, and it's just like, this would have been so much easier if we talked about it at the beginning, and we were putting it in as we go, and so it's coming, but you probably think the same thing. It's slow, right? It's like, no, this should be easy, but it's not.
Yeah, it's been amazing to see what owners are asking for now compared to 10 years ago. A huge difference. I mean, for one, they're asking for it, which is great. They might not know exactly what they need or maybe why they're asking for some of those, but they're asking for it, and oftentimes in a far more thought through and developed program that they're looking for. And that makes it easy to implement from the beginning. It's very painful, as Stuart mentioned, when this comes in 80% of the way through and no one wants to do it. It's boring work, it's tedious work, and then you end up with some fragmented data set that maybe isn't really that useful in the end. But yeah, I've definitely seen a massive shift in the owner appetite for asking for it, prescribing it, even if they maybe don't know exactly what they're going to do with all that information at the end of the job.
I believe I saw one more hand, if you still have a question.
Yeah, Corey Forte with Burns & Mac. VDC is a very big generic term, so I'm curious, what have you seen as successful or best practices for once you get something up and running within that VDC team or realm? And then there's always other options, and there's new technologies coming out. So what have you seen as successful for piloting and then folding those into the mix, top down versus, hey, this is now available options, so on?
Yeah, no, like VDC as a term its definition is changing, right? I think it's, if anything, yeah, as you mentioned, it's a general kind of broad brush term. As for ourselves, for VDC services at Elliston, we essentially white glove a lot of the new tools, or our strategic partners that might come in, making sure that there's as little friction as possible for field teams or other business units to be able to utilize this technology and see value from it and derive value from it. As well, I would say, so being part of a broader team, which we call DPD, Digital Project Delivery, our North Star really is creating smart job sites. It's digitizing the way that we deliver projects. It's making sure that North Star is what we're going towards, not just implementation for implementation's sake,
Yeah, I think I'll add to that really understanding what the core tech stack and what that tech stack is delivering, and then as these new shiny objects that are coming around, we spend so much time just going through and vetting, like, is this tool really what they say it is? And you gotta sometimes go many layers deep and demo it and play with it and find out really what the use case is. And then once you find that, even if you find that it's something amazing, it still doesn't mean that it should be deployed. You have to really then think through the rate of adoption. If I'm a general contractor, I'm gonna require this new software to be used by every trade partner that I work with on every job going forward. What is that rate of adoption for them? Are they gonna welcome it? Are they gonna benefit from it? Are they gonna want to invest the thousands of hours or hundreds of hours it takes? And maybe all those things align and it's right. So we've learned that a lot of times the tech isn't what it says it is. When it is, sometimes it's still not ready to be deployed. It might not be the right environment, or it might be too early. You might have to ease into it a little slower.
Awesome. That concludes our last session of the day. So I'd like to give it up to our speakers, Stuart, Neil, and Shane.